Morning again. We have over the last few weeks been doing a little series, a teaching series about the I am sayings of Jesus. Here they are on the screen. This is where we've been so far. And I'm the resurrection and the life, all the way down the last week, I am the good shepherd. And today we come to this one. I am the way, the truth, and the life. It is one of those statements, those words of Jesus that you've probably heard of. If you've been in church for a while, it will be ringing around in your mind. If you're new here this morning, you may even have heard it as well. Jesus said these words a long time ago, but they have relevance for us today. And we're going to look at these words of Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Look at the context of when he said it and look what impact it might have for us today. We live in a world where there is some questioning, I think, about the relevance of the Christian faith. Is it relevant for the modern world? One hospital chaplain I read this week wrote down some of the replies that he'd had to this question. Would you like to receive Holy Communion? When he was out visiting in hospitals. These were some of the answers he had. Would you like Holy Communion? One person said, no thanks, I'm Church of England. Somebody else said, no thanks, I ordered cornflakes. And a third person said, no thanks, I've never been circumcised. Actual responses to the question, would you like communion? There is that sense of, is the Christian faith relevant? Do I know what it might mean to be a Christian and what it is the central focus for the Christian faith? I read an article in Private Eye a few years back which was headed this, God to leave the Church of England. What it said was this, it says, following the example set by leading former Anglicans, God has indicated that he too is to leave the Church of England. Friends of God believe that the issue is about Christian unity, and therefore that's behind the Almighty's sudden decision to convert to Rome. According to sources close to God, he's been unhappy for some time with the direction that the Anglican Church has been taking, and now has finally had enough. A Church of England spokesperson said, losing God is a bit of a blow, but it's just something we're going to have to learn to live with. What does it mean to be a Christian? What's the central truth of what it means to be a Christian? To live by faith and not by sight. Jesus said these words, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And when we think about this little phrase that Jesus said, we're right at the very core of what it means to be a Christian. We're right at the very core of what it means to have a friendship with God. In fact, these are Jesus' clearest statements of an instruction on friendships, on a friendship with God. And it directs to us the focus, particularly when we look at some of the issues that we might be facing. And we think about the relevance that Jesus might have to them. So in a world where people are worried about purpose or health, or satisfaction, or love, or friendship, or freedom from guilt, or self-image. Is it possible that God is passionately interested in us and in these areas of life? And therefore, these words of Jesus spoken a long time ago are relevant for us today. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And just to give us a bit of context, Jesus is here at the Last Supper with his friends. He's talking with them. He's sharing his final thoughts with them in the last week of his life on earth. He's talking to them about what it means to serve. He's talking and demonstrating with them what it means to look out for one another. And in these words, he's giving some sense of hope for what is to come. Here he is, meeting with his friends, sharing this food together, sharing this final meal, and into that he speaks these words. But they're not words that are out of context. Jesus speaks them because he's already said something else. He said to his friends, don't be troubled. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't be worried. In my Father's house, there are many rooms, and I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you can be too. You know, Jesus said, the way to the place where I'm going. And at that point, he must have thought that John 14 was going to end at verse 5. That was kind of enough for Jesus. That's all you need to know. And you can imagine this moment of silence and in this Last Supper, when all the disciples were looking at each other and giving each other a nudge. Like, who's going to ask the obvious question? There is a question that follows this statement. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Who's going to ask it? They must have been nudging each other. Go on, you do it, Peter. No, you do it. No. And then their eyes lighted on Thomas. Like, Thomas, this is in your ballpark. This is the stuff that you're really good at, Thomas. Why didn't you ask him this question? Because after all, it's in your name. Doubting Thomas. He was unfamiliar with that just at that moment. But anyway, it would bear sense later on. Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going. So how can we know the way? And then Jesus answered him in the personal. He said, I am the way. You see, when Jesus spoke these words, he was communicating something that was beyond this life. He was saying, listen, I'm going to be leaving you in a short while. I'm going to be heading in a different direction. I'm going back from where I came, back to heaven. I am going there, but I'm going to prepare a place for you. Jesus was pointing to the end and saying, don't worry, there is more to come. I am the way for you to get to be into that friendship with God that leads right the way through into eternity. Jesus said, I am the way. And in a world today that asks the question, things like, who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I like this? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Jesus says, I am the way. Brings us right to the very heart of the Christian faith. You see, the Christian faith is not about going to church, although that can be good. The Christian faith is not about, trying really, really hard, although good effort can be positive. The Christian faith is not about persuading God somehow that you've done enough good things come the end of your life that they all stack up positively against the bad stuff. The Christian life isn't like that. If you try and live the Christian life like that, it will be dreary, it will be pointless, and it will be impossible. To live the Christian life in your own strength with your own efforts is a waste of time. Jesus said, I am the way. In other words, when we think about where are we heading, what has life got for us, both ultimately in heaven and for the here and now, Jesus said, I am the way. If you're here this morning and you have a real big question about your next steps, what am I to do in life? What am I to do next month? What's the purpose this week? Jesus says, I'm the way. Don't just try and work it out by yourself. I am the way. You were designed for relationship with me, says Jesus. Therefore, in all of your questions, the big ultimate ones, the ones over the next month, the ones for today, Jesus says, I am the way. I can give you direction. And in fact, the word that Jesus uses here literally means, I am the journey that you take. I love that. I am the journey that you take. As a Christian, what you're doing is you're just taking the hand of Jesus as he says, follow me. And we follow him. And he says, I am the journey. I'm the one that walks with you through all that life will bring to you and throw at you. He is both the means of getting there and he's also the method. If you like, he's like the train track and he's also the train. I am the way. Come to Jesus, who is the way. And Jesus said to them, Not only am I the way, I'm also the truth. Truth seems to be in short supply these days, doesn't it? Somebody said we live in an era of truth decay. I know. Truths like the check is in the post. I was just about to text you. Truths like money cheerfully refunded. Or truths like one size fits all. Don't believe it. I fell for it once. Those jeans still in my cupboard. Your table will be ready in a minute, sir. Open wide. This won't hurt. I know you dentists out there will think differently, but there we go. I'm from the Inland Revenue, and I'm here to help you. Truths can be varied. Truths can bend slightly. Jesus said that he was the truth. The word literally means I am the reality of God. In a world that cries out for the spiritual, that seeks it in any number of different directions, Jesus says, I'm the reality of God. You can play anything else you want to. You can mess about with all kinds of spiritualities, but actually they'll only get you part the way there. Jesus says, I'm the reality of God. And this word truth reminds us of the complete reliability of Jesus in all that he says and all that he does. To his core, he is faithful forever. We just sang it, didn't we? Faithful forever. No other name under heaven and earth by which people might be saved or rescued. Jesus is the reality of God. I wonder if this morning we were all to write books about ourselves, an autobiography of your life. I wonder what you might write. Let's say you read a book on me. Chapter 1, Cy Jones, the early years. Chapter 2, Cy Jones, the teenage sparkling personality. Chapter 3, the intellectual years. Slightly shorter chapter, that one. Chapter 4, Cy Jones's football skills. Some of you will know. A huge chapter, copious notes, lots of detail. Chapter 5, Cy Jones' cooking ability. Now, that's the shortest chapter probably, but imagine a book about you that described your life. And you gave it to me and you said, Cy, here's me, read it. And I read your life. I read chapter after chapter of all that's happened in your life and who you are and the things that you've done. It would be interesting, but it wouldn't be nearly as good as meeting you face to face, to have a conversation where you share something of who you are with me and us together. You see, Jesus is the truth relationally, not informationally, although information is helpful. Jesus says, I am the truth to experience, to meet with, to have in your life. Truth is relational. In this sense of what Jesus was saying, I am the truth. I am the reality of God that you might have me in your life. And on this Pentecost Sunday, when we think about that moment when the Holy Spirit filled up those early disciples and amazing things happened, the church sprang into life. And actually, out of a moment of persecution, they were sent far and wide to talk to other people about Jesus. We remember that Jesus, as he pours his Spirit into our life, says, I am the truth for you to experience. Now, of course, some of us are going to be more intellectually wired, factually wired. Some of us are going to be a bit more experiential in terms of our personalities. But the truth is here to hold on to, that when we come to Jesus, he says, I am the reality of God. I am faithful. And if we went through this room this morning and we listened to the stories of your experience of Jesus being faithful, restoring hope to you in your life, leading you through what you've been through to bring you to this point, never letting you down, never departing from you, always with you, bringing you into a relationship with other people, bringing you into church community that loves and cares. Through the ups and downs of life, your experience of grief or hurt, there would be 150 stories instantly of God's faithfulness in Jesus. I'll never let you down. Jesus said, I am the way. He said, I am the truth. And finally, he said, I am the life. This word literally means, I am the animation of God. I am bringing the vitality of God to you. This is the life that we experience from the inside out. Life in all its fullness, free from guilt, free from shame, free from fear about the what next or the what has been. Jesus brings freedom. He brings his life and gives us perspective on that. How many of you are short-sighted in the room this morning? Come on, even you contact lens wearers. Yeah, it's quite a few of us, short-sighted. You will remember this experience yourself at some point if you're short-sighted. I can remember being 14, 15 years old, sitting in a classroom and looking at the blackboard. Anybody under the age of 50, by the way, a blackboard is a board at the front that people used to write on with little white bits, chalk. Remember that? I remember looking at this blackboard, the teacher writing things on and saying, you read this, and I couldn't see it. And I had to look to the friend next to me who was writing notes and copy what he was writing in order for me to understand what the teacher was saying from the front. I just thought I was stupid or I didn't get it. I couldn't see it. And eventually I went to the optician. And the optician did a little test, reading. You remember that back in the old days, you have to stand at a distance and read the letters. Remember that? And because the optician turned their back at one point, I walked up to the letters like that. And I learnt the first 3 lines. Because I'm quite good with short-term memory. So I learnt the 3 lines like that. And then I came back and said, right, can you read the first? And I read them. I read the whole lot. And then after that, the optician said, and what about lines 4, 5, and 6? I was completely blind, couldn't see a thing, just blurry. And the optician, they do that moment when they put some pretend glasses on you and they drop the lenses in. Do you remember that moment? They drop it in, they drop another one in. And I went for the first time, I can see. It was like a biblical moment. So it was I was blind, but now I can see. I could see the words, I could see the shapes. I could understand the meaning of what was actually in front of me. It was a moment of absolute clarity where life had been blurry and all of a sudden it had focus. I remember going back to school with my glasses in my top pocket and sitting in a class when the teacher said, can you read the board? And I was like, yep, glasses out, glasses on, absolute clarity. I didn't any longer need to cheat from the person next to me. And in fact, what I realized in looking at the person next to me is that they'd actually been writing dummy stuff down on their bit of paper, and I was writing all the wrong stuff. Anyway, that was a different story, but let's just say revenge was mine. So this clarity that Jesus brings, it's like the blurriness goes and the absolute focus comes in. An understanding of what God is and who he is seen in Jesus. If you struggle with understanding what God is like, take a look at Jesus. If you want to understand the stories of the way that God interacts with the world, take a look at Jesus, the Gospels. Read through them. Why don't you go set yourself a challenge if you've never done it to read through Mark's Gospel at some point this week. In fact, you can do it in one sitting probably. Just to see what God is like. Life in all its fullness, Jesus promised. So if you want clarity in life, Jesus says, come to me because I am the life. This is the purpose that Jesus brings. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Then he said, no one comes to the Father except through me. You can try all kinds of things, but actually if you want to get to know God, in the way that God intended, you come through Jesus and you experience him and you know him and you will recognize that clarity of life and perspective. And Jesus goes on in the passage, although we didn't have time to read onto it. Jesus goes on to explain what he means by this. He says in verse 19, later in John 14, he says, look, because I live with you, and because I live, you will also live. In other words, Jesus was pointing forward to that Pentecost moment, saying, because I live, you also will live. You see, this is not just theology. This is not just teaching. This is not just about knowing about something. This is about knowing the person of Jesus. Knowing that because he is alive right now, that we can live. And he does that by sending his Holy Spirit to fill us up from the inside out. Jesus gives life. He gives life when life itself seems amazing. He gives life when life itself seems tough. He gives life because it's who he is. In his description of himself, Jesus said, I am the way to God. I am the truth about God. And I am the life that I give to you from God. These words of Jesus stand the test of time. Countless people will say that they've experienced God in Jesus in this way. And here we are in our day and age, in this moment, with the challenge for us. What will it mean for us today, in this moment, to respond to these words of Jesus? Because otherwise it just becomes a manual that we work through and we say, that was interesting. But what about a moment right now where we say, Jesus, if you are the truth, if you are the way, if you are the life, I give myself to you. And thank you that you give yourself to me. Here is a moment for us to experience something of the goodness of God.